Before we start tonight's show, I want to give one last reminder that this coming Tuesday, December the 22nd at 9 p.m. on the Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio YouTube channel, the first episode of the show is going to premiere. So I highly encourage, if you haven't subscribed to that channel yet on YouTube, that you do so. Our guest wants to remain anonymous, so I'm going to just refer to him as Mike during the show. Mike, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Vic.
Mike, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I'm about 5'7". I live in an area south of Boston, a little bit more east of Providence, Rhode Island. I got a wife, fiance. I have a daughter. At the time of when my encounters happened, I was actually living at my parents' house. I used to play track in high school, used to do football. At the time that this happened, I was in the best shape of my life. I was as strong as I could be. I was about as fast as I could be. That's really about it on me.
The first thing I'd like to talk about with you tonight, Mike, is after all this time, why did you decide to finally come out and openly share the details of this encounter the way you did?
Well, I do remember a while back when I started to get big on Bigfoot and everything. And I remember when a show came up about the Michigan Dogman, and I remember thinking about how stupid the idea came to me. And after this happened, when I actually saw what I saw, it really kind of dawned on me like, wow, this is going to sound even more stupid if I come out and try to tell people about this. So what really made me feel comfortable was actually finding out about your show. When I got to hear that a lot of people are encountering these things, I started to realize, like, wow, I'm not really going crazy. And I felt a little bit more comfortable about reaching out to somebody like yourself.
Well, Mike, I'm so glad that you decided to share it with me, whether you decided to come on the show or not, as I told you in the pre-interview. I think you will really benefit from doing this. How big were the woods around that home where you had that first encounter back by the fire pit?
To map it out in my head, where my mom's house was about, now say you're looking at the house and you're on the street and you're looking towards the house. So to the right of it, I'd say there's probably about 200 to 300 feet of wood between my mom's house and the neighbor's house to the right. Going back, directly right behind my mom's house, about 100 feet, slightly to the left, is the last house that comes off of a side street leading into like a little cul-de-sac area. Now, if you go right behind my mom's house, just heading straight back, I'd say the woods could go back. They go pretty far back. If I had to guess, I'd say a couple acres. But right along the side of that highway comes off, to the left, there's still woods there too. There's some farmland, and that leads more into the upper west areas of Massachusetts, where there's just wood areas all along there. My little patch of woods in the back, it basically connects to a lot of big wooded areas around Massachusetts. But yeah, I'm pretty much city, basically. That's why I was actually so surprised that something like this would come so far into Massachusetts. I was really surprised.
They do so many things that are so hard to understand. One of those things would be their knack for seemingly coming into city limits like what we're about to talk about with that fire pit incident. Before we cover the details of that fire pit incident, there are a few questions I want to throw at you about it. First of all, I wanted to know, did the strange feelings that you're going to talk about, do they happen year-round in that area where these encounters happened, or was it just one specific time of year that you would get these feelings?
There was only one small part of the year that I would get these types of feelings. I moved there my sophomore year in high school. I was 16 at the time, but I moved in the winter. So I was going back there, just having some fun. I have a couple ATVs. I made some tracks back there. And about the summertime was when I started to feel strange, very strange feelings like I was being watched. That's the best way I can describe it. Um, these particular things and feelings that I would get, they would only happen between the very end of June and the very beginning of August. In the wintertime, I would get no types of feelings, even in the early spring, even late fall. It was only in that one particular time of the year between the end of June and the beginning of August. And it varied. It could be just the very end of August, and then I could go the next couple months and get nothing. It really depends, and that happens for about 2 years before I believe, and I'm very positive I had my first encounter.
When you were getting these strange feelings, did you have any idea why you were feeling that way?
No, I I always try to maybe uh, think of something that could help ease my mind. Oh, maybe it's just some guy back here. He's maybe looking for like some hunting spots. I'm not really too sure, but even then, why would somebody be hunting that close to houses? I'm pretty sure that's illegal, but I really couldn't think of anything. The most maybe is maybe a bear, but bears are not around my area. It's very, very rare if a bear comes through. Very, very rare. So I really couldn't think of anything off the top of my head, and it kind of stumped me for a couple years until I could figure out what it was.
Oh, I can understand how it would be hard to figure out. That's just so unnatural to feel that way. Let's get into this first encounter. Please give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay. Step into this. It was the end of June. I just graduated from high school. We were gonna have a fire at my girlfriend's house. She was my girlfriend at the time. Now she's my fiance. We were gonna have a fire at her grandmother's house. I'll actually say this area where I was just to give people a good estimate of where I lived. Her grandmother lived in Rainham, so that can give you an idea of where these encounters that I had happened. I feel comfortable revealing that. So we were going to have a fire over at her house, but her grandmother didn't really like the idea of that, so we ended up doing it at my house. So she brought her best friend and her best friend's boyfriend. Now, to give you a good idea of what my backyard looks like, in the backyard, there isn't that much until you hit the wood line. So from the back of my house to the wood line, I would say it's about 40 to 50 feet. But I have about a 7 to 8 foot porch in the back that goes all around back. And right behind that, I have an in-ground pool, but it's not used. It's been there. It's been broken. We weren't able to get to the landlord to allow us to fix it, so it's just there. Right behind that is a shed. Now, the pool and the shed in the house are on top of a small hill. So right behind the pool and the fence that goes around the pool, there's about a couple feet of space, and then there's just a drop. There's about a 4-foot drop, some wooden beams that keep the all the soil up there intact. And from where the beams are, there's about 10 to 15 feet of space before you hit the first trees. And to the left of the shed, there's a little tree house, and to the right of the shed, there's a wooden swing set. It's really old and wooden. Now, between the shed and between the swing set was where I had a couple barrels, and so I put one of the barrels up right in the middle of that, just far enough so it wouldn't catch the pine trees on fire. And, that's where I had my little fire pit. So it rained. I'm not really quite sure, but I know it rained either the day before or that early morning. Not really quite sure. So it was kind of damp out. So I did go around, tried to get as good a firewood as I could get, as dry as I could get it at least. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to just do this without any type of gasoline or anything else, like cardboard or something to help get it going. So I got some gasoline. We were all hanging out back there. We got a couple drinks. Yeah, we were young, We were just being kids. So I get the gasoline. I'm trying to get it started. It's not really getting started. Now, mind you, there's a lot of wildlife in my backyard. There's turkeys running back there all the time. Occasionally, you'll go outside, you'll see a deer. There's so many types of birds back there. Crickets. I even got some frogs and toads in my pool because, it's never used. So that night, it was very loud with activity. You could hear the birds chirping away. I mean, the birds go all the way till the morning. They don't stop. You could hear the crickets. You could hear the toads in my pool. No moonlight, so it was very dark outside. Before I continue on any further, I want the listeners to get a better view of the wooded area right behind where we were standing. So from the fire pit to the wood line, before you reach your first set of pine trees that go off in a line, it's about maybe 10 feet. And right next to those pine trees are some pretty large rocks, a couple feet off the ground. And right behind that, it's just ATV tracks, more trees, more bush. When you go right about 30 to 50 feet, that's when you get more bushes and you get more thorns. There's just a lot of thorn bushes over there, just so much. And that's to the right of the swing set. So I'm trying to get this fire started. I need to go in the house. I need to get some paper towels. I didn't really have any cardboard. I used it all up that I had. So the second or third time of me going up and getting some paper towels to light it up in the fire, it was one of those things that just kind of stick out to you in a memory. I noticed that all the sound in the woods kind of stopped. You couldn't hear the birds anymore. You couldn't hear the crickets. You couldn't hear the toads. It was just one little thing that kind of just stuck out. Didn't think anything of it. So I go back the second or third time, and I'm throwing it in there, and I noticed that I started to hear some leaves breaking. So, I say to them, hey, you guys hear that? We all turn and look. We don't really hear it as much. If I had to guess, it would be about 50 to 70 feet off to the right where all these thorns are and heavy bush. So we didn't think anything of it. I go up a fourth time. I go up a fifth time. But in between that, I have to say that when I would come back, you could hear the leaves breaking like they were getting closer. And, I would say to them, you guys hear that? And, they all look. I mean, I couldn't really guess to say the time before I really heard it close, but I'd have to say around the same distance, still 50 to 70 feet, maybe closer. I'm not really that sure. It's very dark out. So my last time, I come back, and that's when I noticed that the leaves started breaking, and they were directly behind us, maybe 10 feet away. I mean, this was very close. So once I heard that, they all heard it too. So I say, you guys hear all that? And then they shake it off. They're like, oh, it's probably that thing that we've been hearing back there. About right after this gentleman, I'm not going to say his name, he said that. Now, their backs are facing towards the woods. They're facing towards the house. I'm the only one who's looking towards the woods, facing the woods. Right after he said that, about 1 foot off the ground, right behind them, you could see two amber eyes. I mean, I'd have to say they were about the size of a regular human's eyes. That's just my estimate on that. And, I was like, wow. Hey, guys, turn around. Look at that. Look at those eyes. Right as soon as they turned around, it was gone. It was just gone. And, I'm saying to them, oh, you guys didn't see those eyes? And, they didn't see it. So we talk off, oh, it was probably that thing we've been hearing. Directly right after they turned around, the eyes just popped up, right up again. And I'm staring at whatever it is right in the eyes. That's when I started to really get an uneasy feeling. I tried to shake it off. And, I just said to them, I did whatever, because I couldn't get the fire started. So we were just hanging out back there, just being loud, and just sitting in the dark. So the whole vibe was really creeping me out. So I said to them, hey, let's go out front. Let's just get out of here. Now, we start heading around. We're heading around the right side of the house, and we're basically in the front yard. The best way I can describe this sound that I heard after was like hearing a full-grown football player in pads and everything just going through bushes and just breaking trees and everything. I mean, twigs. I mean, that's just what it sounded like. It just sounded like a big mass just going through everything. And I noticed that towards the back left of me, which would be to the right of the swing set, which is where, heading in the direction where all these thorns and heavy bushes are. And that was one thing that kind of stood out to me. Now, a while back, I'd say actually the year before this, me and my friends left one of my buddies' houses, and right when we got out into the street, we noticed to our right, there was this big mass that was standing in the street. So we looked right, and we noticed that it was just a giant bear just covering the street. And, we looked at each other like, what? And, we just started running and everything. Now, the only animal that I could possibly say that this might have been was a bear. That was the only thing that was coming to my mind. Oh, maybe it was just a bear, snooping up, just getting a better look or whatever. So I played that off. Now, the next day, I was going out through the back, and I'm like, I should probably go back and see where this was. Maybe I could see some tracks. So I go back there. Now, like I said before, right behind where the barrel was, about 10 feet of space, and there's a tree line and some rocks. I go over to one of these rocks. Now, this particular rock was kind of, it was different than the other ones in the sense that the front part of it, which would be the side facing towards our fire pit, it was about a foot off the ground, but it went down in an arc. So it went down at an angle till it hit basically the ground. That could be a reason why I saw eye shine, and then whatever it was just ducked, because it would just be covered, because the rock went up at an angle. So when I get to this rock, I'm looking down, I'm noticing these three distinct claw marks all along the base of it. And I'm looking around, and you could see where something big had laid down. I mean, bigger than me. Like I said, I'm only 5'7". I'm not that tall of a guy. Whatever it was pretty big. I could see the little trail that it left. Now, it was still muddy back there from the day before when it rained, so you could still make out some tracks. So I'm following the tracks, and I come over to three distinctive tracks that stuck out to me. One more in particular than the others. So I'm going over to this track, and the best way I could describe it is it looked like a giant dog's footprint. So I put my foot down beside it. Now my foot across, I would have to say, is about 4 inches to 4.5 wide. I don't really know how long, maybe about 9, 10 inches long. Now, the size of this footprint, it felt like it was about 3 times the size of my foot. But it was probably realistically only about 2 times. But anyway, that's still a pretty massive print, especially for a dog. So I'm comparing my foot to the footprint, and the width of it was about 6 to 8 inches, and the length was longer than my foot. Now, maybe that was because when it stepped, it slid, but you could still see the solid print of where the foot landed. It was really big. It had 4 distinct claws, well, I would assume claws, that came out in the tips, and it just looked like a giant dog footprint. Still, I didn't think anything of it. To me, I'd never seen a bear footprint before, so I just presumed that it was maybe a bear, because giant dogs aren't supposed to exist. That kind of concluded that encounter.
When you told the girls that were there with you about what you had seen, what kind of a response did you get? Did they ever come around to believing you, or did you get the impression all the way through this that they just weren't going to buy it no matter what you told them?
They definitely knew something was there. They're just going to think that maybe it's a raccoon or something small. They're not going to be too edged out of maybe a bear coming through, because they would never think that a bear would come through. They did believe me, because they heard the sounds too. But when they did look to see eye shine, it just so happened to disappear right as soon as they all would look.
When you describe those yellowish, amberish eyes as disappearing, how did it do that? Did it duck its head down below that boulder, or are you saying that it closed its eyes? What happened that night?
Now, I'm assuming that it most likely closed its eyes for a moment and maybe ducked down, because you could kind of see, you could see the eyes go down slightly. I mean, maybe a centimeter. Like they were maybe heading in a down direction, and maybe it just closed its eyes going down as well. That's maybe the best thing I could think of what happened. But yeah, that's really all I can really think of what could possibly have happened.
If it was that dark out that night, and if we're talking about a black creature, I guess it would be hard to make out much in the way of details as to what was exactly going on, so I can't blame you for not being able to tell.
One thing I should also explain too, those pine trees, from about 3 feet up, the branches start coming out. I mean, these are pretty thick and heavy branches, so if something were to be standing behind there, whatever it is, it's not going to be able to see through those pine trees. It's going to have to go down on the ground and look right underneath the base of it. That's the only way anything would be able to see us. So it would make sense that it would have gotten, whatever it was, which I know now, which it is, would have gone down on all fours and laid down and looked through underneath the pine tree.
Ew, that's awfully creepy. Well, moving forward, Mike, let's talk about this second encounter that you had. How long was it between this first encounter that you just were talking about and the second encounter?
It was about a year later, almost exactly. It was about the very end of July, but I want to say it was about the first day of August.
So it was about a year later. Let's get into the details of this second encounter. Please give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay, it was around 10 p.m. at night. Don't know specifically, but I was going out to my girlfriend's car for something. I can't remember if it was something for me or for her. At the time, I did have a dog. It was my sister's Shiba Inu, and basically, to give a description of what it would look like, is basically a small husky, or maybe a German Shepherd. It's just a small version of that. A little bit bigger than a Chihuahua, so, you know, he's a pretty cute little dog. Now, I did notice when I was about to be heading outside that he was looking out the door, and he was kind of acting a little antsy that night. Didn't think anything of it. So I step out the door, and to this day, I don't know why I didn't turn on the garage lights. I don't know why I didn't do that. So I step about 8 feet away from the door. I go down the little steps to like the little front porch, and I'm going along the pavement, little sidewalk that leads to the driveway. Now, the driveway probably goes about 15 feet across. Not really exactly sure, but from where I was standing, about 10 feet away was my dad's green truck, and about 15 feet away was his trailer that he had right there. And from where the trailer was, it kind of went down in a slight little hill to where the tree line was. Actually, I should say where basically all the thorn bushes were, because there was a lot of thorn bushes back there. And right in the middle of the thorn bushes, about, if I had to guess, I'd say another 15 feet from my dad's truck, his trailer, I should say. I cut a little path through there so that way when I mowed the grass, I could get in there and I could just dump it out in the woods right there. So there's a nice little path right there. And once you go through that path, you go right past all the thorns and it's just open woods from there on. Right as soon as I stepped out, about 8 feet from the door, I stopped, and the feeling I would always get from being out in the woods and just being out in the trees and everything came over me again. But this time it felt so much more powerful. I could just feel myself, the fear just screaming inside of me, and I didn't know why. In that moment, literally as I'm about to turn my head to the left, I hear this very low-tuned growl, and it pierced me so hard. I could almost literally feel it shaking my ribs. It was just, the bass behind it is the best way I can say it, is the bass that it had. It just hit you. It just hit you hard. So, as I heard that, now my head's turning, and I come up, two eyes just stick out right to me. There was a little bit of moonlight that night, and to the right there was a street light that was on, so it did illuminate the area pretty decently well. So I'm turning my head, and I see these eyes. I'm trying to realize what I'm looking at, because what I'm looking at isn't, it's not supposed to exist, and the reason why I knew it wasn't just a normal giant wolf was the hands that I saw on this thing. Sorry, it's just I'm just starting to get a little wary again. Okay. So I've locked eyes with this creature, and we're just looking right at each other for about 5 to 7 seconds, I'd say, in between that. And that was enough time for me to really get a good look at what I was looking at. I did glance down for a moment because its hand really stuck out to me. It was one of the things that really, really stuck out. And those 5 to 7 seconds, we didn't move at all. We just looked right at each other. And now getting into more of the detail, I'm going to start with head to toe. The eyes, they were just glowing, yet more yellowish. Not really the amber that I saw before. It had the muzzle about as long as maybe a German Shepherd, no longer. You could see the black nose, and you could see where the hair stopped around the nose. The whole face was covered in hair. It basically got bigger around the neck, kind of like a lion's mane. It was bigger around the neck area. You could see the 2 pointed ears, and one of the big things that stuck out to me also was its teeth. It had really big canines, and you could see that it was, I don't know if it was maybe trying to show its teeth, but you could see that where it's right where the muzzle was, the lips were kind of wrinkled up a tiny bit, and that really did freak me out even more. Going down more to the shoulders, the best way I could describe the way the muscle tone in the shoulders and the body build of this thing was a bodybuilder on steroids. That's really the only way you can describe it. Just go look up your classic bodybuilder that's, one of the biggest in the world, taking steroids and just constantly in the gym every day of their life, just nonstop every day. Now, mind you, this thing was also covered in fur, but you could still see the muscle on it. it was just that defined and that big. Going down more, it got more darker towards the bottom of it, but the right side of it, actually I should say the left side of it, I'm looking towards the right side of it. So the left side of it was illuminated by the street light more. And it had its left hand on the ground. Its left leg was on the ground as well. Both legs, from what I could tell, were both on the ground. More in like a sitting position. You could see that it was definitely crouched. I've had time to really think about it, and it's kind of when you have memories, triggers more memories, and that triggers more memories, so you're able to remember more detail. I was also able to see that its leg resembled that of a dog leg. It went down where the knee was, but at the same time, where you think the knee would be, it would also be in another area, so it kind of looked backwards, but it was crouched. The legs were also pretty muscular from the fuzziness of memory that I do have. And the only appendage that wasn't on the ground was its right arm. The best stance that I can possibly give for people to get a description of what exactly basically I was looking at was, in the beginning of your shows, you have a dog man that's kind of got all three of his hands on the ground, but he's got one up, and he's kind of howling. That's kind of basically the stance that it was in, but just looking just right at me. So, getting more into the detail of this thing's right arm and hand, another good way that I can kind of say what it looked like was also in that picture. It kind of looked like, almost like a deformed, but longer hands, like where your palm would be. It was longer, and the fingers were very abnormally long. You could see the claws as well. I'm not really sure how long those were, but the fingers were really, really creepily long. Okay. All right.
I realize it's not easy to talk about, Mike. Take your time. You're doing just fine.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to. I'm just trying to keep it calm and explain, because I feel like I'm doing a horrible job explaining this. So the fingers were really creepily long, and that's what I really knew. What I was looking at was not a giant wolf. If I had to say, like I said, I'm 5 feet 7 inches. I'm not tall. With maybe shoes, I'm maybe 5'8". This thing, it wasn't standing up. It was hunched over, and that's actually another detail now that comes to my mind. Its head was kind of tucked down a little bit. You could see like its back kind of went up, kind of like, somebody who just hunched over and their back just, is round and higher. And it kind of went even to where the shoulders were. If I had to guess, I would say that it was about 5 feet off the ground from where the head was, maybe a couple more inches, including the back. I'm not really too sure. It was really massive. It was just so massive. And, I'm starting to come to grips. And mind you, every second that went by, and studying this thing, we're just locked eyes on each other. Every second that was going by, the fear inside of me was building up. Just building and building and building. To the point where it was kind of like I snapped out of it, the little trance that I was in, the shock. It just kind of, I just snapped out of it, and I just unleashed everything that was inside of me, and I really don't feel that much of like a girl saying this, but I yelled and screamed like a little girl. I screamed at the top of my lungs, crying for my stepfather. And as I was doing that, I just turned my head and just booked it for the door. Now, to get a good description on myself, also, I was a very big track star in high school. I won a lot of medals at a certain time of my career. I was one of the fastest people in Massachusetts. I was that top guy. Um, so I was in the house very quick. I was in the best shape of my life, but it felt like forever. And as I'm going to close the door, my dog, my little Shiba Inu, just gets right through the crack, and he just books it out into the direction where I just saw this thing. And I'm sorry, I loved him to death, but after seeing what I saw and just everything, the fear and everything, it's almost like my survival instinct, just kicked in. Like, I just, it was just save myself, save myself. I closed the door and I locked it. I didn't care. I didn't care what happened to him. It sounds cruel, but I really didn't care. And I'm still screaming, mind you. I'm still screaming in terror on the top of my lungs, crying for my stepfather. And within 20 to 30 seconds, not even, I don't really know, he comes down and he's like, hey, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? He's got his bat in his hand. I'm like, guy just ran outside. There's a giant wolf out there. You need to go get him. As he's going out to the door, maybe just his presence made me feel safe. That's really all I can say. So I actually did follow him, but I didn't leave the porch. I stayed right there at the steps. So 3 feet from the door, I'm just standing there watching him go over to this area. And I could see my dog. He was directly on the other side of my dad's trailer, and he was just running back and forth. He was just constantly running back and forth. My dad goes over, he grabs him. I'm like, do you see anything? He says he doesn't see anything. So he comes back in, and, I remember trying to explain to him what I saw. I did have tears coming down my eyes. I never experienced that type of fear in my life. And, I'm explaining to him, there's a giant wolf over there. That's the best way I can describe it. And, he says, it was probably just the wheelbarrow's reflection, because right next to it, there was a wheelbarrow. And from where he was standing, he said that the way that the metal reflected, he could see maybe how I could see two eyes. But I explained to him, no. I know what I saw, man. There was a giant wolf. It was a giant wolf. Mind you, I didn't want to say to him that, the best way I could describe it was a werewolf, because, he's just going to look at me like I had 10 different heads, and he's not going to believe me even more. So we kind of just left it at that. I went upstairs. I didn't get any sleep that night. I didn't sleep good for about a whole week. And, as time went by, I kind of just came to grips that happened, but I just tried to close the door, just, let it just be in the back of my subconscious mind, and it just stay there. Just, casually as I go on with life, just forget about it. And that's what I did for a few years.
Earlier on in this interview, you mentioned the fact that you felt like you're doing a bad job talking about this encounter. If you think about it, when you're talking about something that's so traumatic, how could anyone be at home and at rest when they're talking about something like this? You're doing a great job. You're just doing the best you can talking about something that's so hard to think about and relive. I think you deserve a lot of credit for coming forward and sharing these details. Please don't be so hard on yourself.
I appreciate that.
Well, the truth is the truth. I'm just glad that you're coming forward like this and sharing these details because I'm so convinced that you are going to benefit from doing it. That's why, in my opinion, it's such a good thing. As far as the particulars of what you saw that night would go, I know you said it wasn't standing up tall, it wasn't standing up straight, but if you had to guess from what you saw, how tall do you think this thing would have been if it would have been on two legs and not stooping over like that?
Well, if its legs were even half the size of its arms, I'd say it could easily stand up to around between 8 to 10 feet, easily in between that range. It was just so massive. It was unlike anything I've ever seen. It was just truly ginormous.
Yeah, it does sound like it was quite the specimen. For you to handle it as well as you did, you deserve a lot of credit because a lot of people would have just melted right into the ground on the spot. Through all this, was that Shiba Inu ever injured, or did that dog make it out unscathed?
Oh yeah, he came right back in the house right after my stepfather grabbed him. Now that I think about it, I don't think that he saw what I saw. I think after I screamed and I turned, I'm assuming that this thing just took right off into the woods, right where that area where I was saying earlier, where there was a little opening where it could just get right through the thorns. I'm assuming that's exactly what it did, because he ran out there and he was just running back and forth. I don't know, maybe he could still sense that something was around, but if he saw what I saw, he would have turned around. He would have been back in that house before I could have been. I tell you, he would not have been out there as brave as he was. And I should say that he is a brave dog. He's come across, well, what we call them around over here is we call them puffer cats. It's like this. It's kind of like a rodent. No, I shouldn't say like a rodent. It's kind of like a weasel, but on steroids, and they just tear into everything. And they're the best way I can describe it is kind of like a wolverine. They kind of look like that. Maybe that's what they are. I'm not sure. But he's stared down these things. He's gone toe to toe with these things, and he's not scared. And these things are very ferocious. So he's known for having that temperament. He'll just confront whatever it is. He doesn't care. That's kind of what his breed is. That's what they were bred to do. So, he's just, oh, there's something out there. He's scared. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go get it. That's basically what was going through his head, I presume.
He sounds like he's pretty fiery. He must be to take on things like that.
Yeah, like I said, I just don't think he really understood what he was going out there to confront.
Oh, I'm sure he didn't understand that much, but thank goodness he made it out of that without a mark on him. You mentioned it wrinkling its muzzle the way it did to show its teeth, but as far as its body went, am I to understand that it was pretty much motionless through all this, or did it move from what you saw?
The only movement that stuck out was its lips. Like, basically when a dog is growling and showing its teeth, it'll like its lips will kind of shake a little bit, and the fingers moved a little bit. But other than that, it was motionless.
Seeing that thing was bad enough, if it would have made a move towards you, I can only imagine how much worse it would have been for you to deal with what happened that night. As far as dealing with it would go, though, Mike, you told me in the pre-interview that you recently told your fiancée about those encounters. How did she respond when you told her about this?
She is a very religious woman. When I started to tell her about it, actually, I started out with when we were hanging out on the fire and everything, and I never really explained it to her that much, and I never told her about when I went back there and I saw this giant track where something massive was laying down right behind us, and I didn't even get finished telling her that, and she was already starting to get creeped out. She's like, whoa, Mikey, where are you trying to go with this? But after I did tell her what I did see, and I explained to her the best thing that it could possibly have been, she does believe me, and I appreciate her so much for listening to what I had to say to her. It really did help a lot, because, if I was talking to my buddies about this, they would laugh at me. This isn't Monster Quest. This is real life.
When you have someone like her who's so big of a part in your life that you can share the feelings that you've got about these encounters you've had, it helps so much. I'm so glad that she's there for you and she responded the way that she did. That's just so good to hear about.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for it. But she definitely doesn't want to go out and have any more fires at my mom's house anymore. Not like that would happen, but she definitely, all that is out the window now.
Oh, I can understand that. I don't blame her at all. After knowing that these things exist now, are you obsessed with finding out all the info that you can on them? Or are you just totally turned off to the point where you really don't want to even talk about it?
I kind of went through that phase. In the beginning, I didn't want anything to do with it. I'm assuming that it's been a couple of years and I've had time to relax about it. That now I want to learn everything about these things, because it really makes you wonder. These things had to have been around, a long time ago. Our ancestors had to have been running around with these things in the woods too. So I've been very intrigued on learning anything about these things, history, sightings, anything to help understand. But I'm definitely not about to go look for these things. That's for sure. I don't want to go out there in the field and do that type of research. I would rather sit home on the computer and learn that way.
Yeah, that is a lot safer. What would you have to say to someone who tells me that they want to head out and try to find one of these things in their nearest woods?
I would say that you're crazy, for one. Two, the moment you see this thing, you're going to be wishing you never did what you did. Three, even if you do come out alive, because, mind you, that thing could have had me. I know it could have had me before my hand even got to the door. And like I said, I was in the best shape of my life, and I was a track runner at that time. And just the presence that this thing gives off, and just from hearing other people's accounts where these things are running alongside of a car, chasing after cars, and they're keeping up with it, keeping pace. You don't want to be out there with a predator like that. That's just like saying, I'm a gazelle and I'm going to go hang around the lion's den. That's just stupid. You don't go do that. For the people that are even more wanting to learn about these things, and, they have a lot of experience out in the woods, they're hunters and all that, and you got guns and everything, I still would very refrain from going out there and doing that. Uh, even with your with 5 people, if you really want to go out there, you really want to do some real research, I'd say you would have to at least go with about 10 people and get in a camper. You definitely would have to stay away from where these things are, because you don't know what can happen. I'm going for my gun license right now. Even with a .45 caliber round, if I shot this thing, it probably would have tickled. The amount of mass that this thing has, these people really don't understand because they haven't seen it. Unless you got a couple green berets out there with .50 caliber rifles hiding in the trees, I don't think there's any way you're going to be able to take down one of these things. It's just so massive. And it's a top predator, so it's going to know you're there before you even know it's there. So just from that one little encounter that I've had, I definitely feel safe to say, don't go out there looking. If you know some people who are actual researchers about this, who, go out there and they actually do these types of things, maybe contact them, because they're going to know more about going and researching these things versus you, who has no idea. You're just going to go out there, make a bunch of noise in this thing's territory, piss it off, and then next thing you know, you're just another missing persons case. I can't stress that enough.
You mentioned how jittery you were feeling going into this interview. how thinking about these experiences was so unsettling for you. You talked about how talking with your fiance about this recently helped you, but that still doesn't tell me how you're doing psychologically as far as dealing with these two encounters you had. Where are you at right now? Are you coping with it fairly well or not?
I'm definitely doing, I'd have to say, pretty decently good. Talking about it has definitely helped me out a lot. But the only things that kind of, I could say, still affect me from that is I'm still very antsy about actually the dark, just the dark in general. I could not be out in the woods in the dark. I just could not be out there in the dark. Even just being in my house, when I'm in a really dark part of my house, I get very unnerved and I have to turn on a light. It's affected me that much. And now I live more in the city, so, I got apartments all around me where I'm at, and just being outside, walking in from my car, just walking up the little driveway and it's just dark around, I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. It's it's definitely still there. The experience is still affected me to that extent, but for the most part, I still feel like I'm doing a lot better than I was in the past. When that happens, I couldn't go out there on my quad for a long time, even during the day. And I love just riding around back there in the woods, having a good old time. And after that happened, it made me really think, hey, maybe that weird feeling you were getting when you were 16, 17, and you were out here playing in the woods, maybe that's what it was. Maybe the few times you heard leaves crunching in the background, that's probably what that was. And that really did affect me. So I did not go back there, especially in the summer. I would never be back there in the summer. I just couldn't do it. But like I said, I think I'm taking it a lot better since I've come out and I've talked to you. I've talked to her. I've noticed that I'm not really antsy anymore. Just walking in from my car, but the dark still does creep me out. I don't like the darkness at all.
It's awfully encouraging to hear about the progress you're making. Are you where you need to be yet? No, you're definitely not, but it sounds like you're at least getting there. Are all these after effects going to totally go away at some point? I highly doubt that they will, but I think in time you will get to the point where you can deal with this in a way that allows you to go on with your life and do the things you need to do without worrying about it so much that it is a hindrance. Well, having said that, Mike, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Um, if you know that these things are around in your area, if you've heard from people that these things are coming around, making a ruckus in your woods, maybe going through people's trash, the best thing I could say is first learn more about this, hear more experiences, listen to what knowledge is out there for the most part, and try to learn what you can do to not have one of these experiences, whether that's putting a 10-foot stone wall around your house or something, I don't know. But if you know that these things are happening, please don't go out there looking for them. That's just one thing I really, really, really have to stress. Because I know there's some people out there that just really don't think. You do not want to see this thing up close. If you really want to go out there and search for something, go out and look for Bigfoot. From what I hear, from the encounters, all the reports that I hear, they're a lot less likely to charge at you and take off your head versus what I saw that night. I really can't stress that enough. And if you have had an encounter, even close to the city where I have, it's not unheard of. So if you're listening to this right now, all I can say is that there is a community out there that is willing to listen, and you can be unanimous about this. One thing I can say is that holding it in really sometimes doesn't help at all. From my point of view and from my own experience, coming out and talking about this has made me feel a lot better. Even if you can't be open to, people around your family or friends, there's still people out there that you can reach out to and can help you with what you're going through. Because I know there are a lot more people out there that have had encounters with these things that are a lot more traumatic than my little encounter that I had. My 2 little encounters, I should say. And it might be affecting you a lot more psychologically to keep you from coming out. All I can say to you guys is that, there really is people out there that are willing to listen and willing to help, and you shouldn't feel alone. Just reach out, and people will be there to help you.
Well said, Mike. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing the details of those encounters. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Vic. I really appreciate you having me come out here.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, have yourself a great night, okay?
All right, you too, Vic. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you. Episode 76. Before I bring on tonight's guest, I wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. Hope everyone's having a great one. Also wanted to let you know, instead of doing the normal phone interview that I normally do with guests, tonight's guest didn't have access to a phone, so I had to use Skype. Unfortunately, in the process, my audio was up and down and all over the place. It wasn't steady and level like it normally is. So I apologize for that in advance. Also, too, one last thing, if you don't know already, the first episode of Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio premiered last Tuesday night on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to the channel so that you're instantly notified when new episodes of the show appear, I'd highly recommend that you do so. Tonight's guest is Jay Tucker. Jay, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Jay, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I've lived in Mississippi from I was born until I was probably 17, left and have moved all over the country, been outside the country for a little bit. I've done security work, worked as for police officer. I've worked bodyguard, anything that has to do with security I've done. I've been in almost all 50 of the United States doing security or, like I said, law enforcement in one means, manner, or another. The security companies I work for, I won't name because I don't have permission to do that.
Oh, no, I understand. How much time do you spend out in the woods?
As up to a year and a half ago, I spent about 90% of my time in the woods because of my job, what I did. I can say I worked Border Patrol for a good while, and like I said, and the way we worked was 17 days on and 7 days back home. And now that I'm retired from doing that, I moved back to my home state of Mississippi. I live in northern part of Mississippi, and I stay in the woods constantly. I'm talking about I help out with people that have problems with poachers on their land. I go scout out pre-sites for you name it, and I've done it for Boy Scout trips to teaching my own kids. Like I said, I spend a good bit of time. If I'm not at work, I'm in the woods. That's where I feel at home at. And I've seen pretty much every kind of wildlife in Mississippi and the surrounding states. I've even seen some that supposedly are not in this area, like cougars. And when I was younger, I did see a black panther. That's what we call them, a black cougar. They're supposedly not in this area, but it's mighty mysterious that the Wildlife Federation in Mississippi has a law set where you cannot, if you even point a flashlight at these animals, they can write you a ticket and arrest you.
Wow.
Yes, sir. And they're not supposed to be here, but yet they have that law on the books. We have some around Louisiana. We have some like in Greenville, Mississippi, the surrounding areas towards Louisiana and Arkansas. We do have a few small black bears, but not very many. But like I said, no, sir. I'm pretty good at identifying tracks of animals. To, like I said, if I can take show me a picture of half of an animal, I can just about tell you what it is. Before I left Mississippi, when I was a kid, we had several hunting camps that would do guided hunts for out-of-state people. And that's one of the things I've done. I was 15, and I was carrying grown men out on guided trips, setting them up in blinds, getting them ready to kill their nice deer.
I think it goes without saying you do know your way around out there. See, that's the biggest thing right there, Jake. A lot of skeptics, they'll say when someone claims to have had a dogman encounter, they'll say it was just a case of mistaken identity. With you having all that experience, I don't see how anyone could say that.
And no, sir, because at one time when I was a kid, I grew up in the country. I'm talking about it was across the woods. It was a mile to my nearest neighbor. I would catch baby foxes. I've had timber wolves as pets and raccoons, stuff like it. Like I said, no, there's no, if you see one of these creatures, there is no misidentifying it. There's nothing else that looks like them. And the biggest thing is the eyes. I will never forget the eyes of that creature. And I was 10 foot, I was 10 foot away from it, moving down the road in a vehicle. But I'm talking about we were 10 foot away looking at each other. And there, like I said, there's no a wolf. I've seen plenty of wolves in Alaska, Montana, you name it. They don't get that big. I've never seen, the biggest wolf I've seen is 150 pounds, and it was in captivity. And it still, it does not compare to this animal. They closely resemble, but that's it. This animal is the dog man is a total different animal. I don't know exactly where it came from, what it is, but it's a totally different animal.
Before you had that encounter with that dogman that night, Jay, had you heard the term dogman?
No, I had not ever heard of a dogman. I didn't even know nothing about these creatures. I had known about Bigfoot. I've had encounters with them, a couple of them. This thing does not look nothing like a Bigfoot. That's what made me, once we had our encounter, it was me and my wife. She doesn't want to be named or come into this. She just wants to forget about it. Once we had our encounter, yes, we came back, and I'm the kind of person, I don't get scared easily. This thing scared me. The biggest reason why is because I know in my heart this thing had bad intentions because of what it was doing. There was no reason for it to do what it did. An animal does not do what this did. We came back and started researching. I researched, and I finally found some podcasts. Yours was one of them. I liked what I heard. It was more intuitive. It was more about listening to the person, and the stuff that the people were describing was exactly what I had seen. So I binged listening to your show because I want to know what these are, because I have my kids that go in the woods with me. And that's my biggest thing is I wanted to know what this was, how rare they were, because I've been in the woods all my life. I've been around the world, been in jungles. I've never seen this, never heard of it. And it was shocking.
Oh, it's shocking to say the least. A lot of eyewitnesses tell me about this frustration they feel. They feel like the dogman they encountered took something away from them. A lot of them used to love spending time out in the woods, whether we're talking about camping, fishing, hunting, you name it. Did you ever feel that, or was it just a different set of emotions after you had your encounter?
It was a different set of emotions. It was more that I want to know what this is so I know how to protect my family from this. Because, like I said, this animal tried to attack us for no reason whatsoever. That's unusual in a wild animal. Most of the time, they will avoid you at all costs, because a fight not only could kill you, it could kill them. It made me want to understand and find out, like I said, how rare these things are, how often people see them, because I wanted to be able to protect my family.
It is frustrating when you're put in a position like that and you really don't know how to handle it. All right, Jay, let's get into it. Please tell us about your encounter, starting with why you were at the location where you had that encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay. I think the date was December the 10th. I'm real bad with dates and names. But the reason why I can remember that and everything so fresh is we have a family Christmas. We have a very large family, my side of the family. And I hadn't been to our family function in about 6 years because of what I used to do. And like I said, we lived out of state and never was convenient. So this family function had came up and we went to it. I live in the north part of Mississippi, and it was in the central part of Mississippi, 2 hours away from us. And the way you have to get to this is take 45 down to the Natchez Trace, and then from the Natchez Trace, you get on it in Tupelo, Mississippi on mile marker 250 and go south on the Natchez Trace, and you get off at mile marker 205 and get onto a little road called 82. And you go from 82 to Winona, Mississippi. That's where I'm originally from, which is Montgomery County. We went down there for our family Christmas and didn't plan on staying or nothing, and stayed there till about, I'm going to say it was already dark. It was probably 7:38, because after we left, like I said, it was already dark. The kids were tired. My wife was in the passenger side, and we were talking about how nice everything was. Well, we got down 82 highway and got to the turn on to Natchez Trace, and was going down the Natchez Trace. Now, at night, especially, it was between 8:30 and 9:30, I'm going to say, roughly in between there. There's not a whole lot of traffic on this road. Like I said, it is a road in the middle of nowhere. You can Google the Natchez Trace and you'll see how desolated it is. It's actually a bicycle trail that they allow cars to use. And like I said, there's no other vehicles on the road. We got on it, like I said, at mile marker 205. And it's like they come in and it's a bunch of deadfalls, stuff like that they've took out on both sides of the road. So it's pretty open through there. The first part of it, probably 8 miles from 205 going back north. We come up on this little bridge and off to the driver's side of the road, which is the left side of the road going north. I see this animal. And at first, we're probably 200 yards back from the animal. I think it's just a coyote at first because of how it's standing and how far we are away from it. And I told my wife, I said, look, I said, coyote. Because we were looking for deer, because deer are bad on this road. Now, the speed limit is only 50 miles an hour on this road. I was actually, because I knew there were no law enforcement after 6 o'clock, there was no law enforcement, and it's only rangers on that road. I was doing faster than when I was supposed to be going, and thank God I was, Like I said, we were 200 yards back. First seen the animal. It was probably 75 yards from the edge of the road to the wood line. As we approach it, it's almost at the wood line. It's probably 4 feet. All I had to do was take 2 steps. It's in the woods. It's safe. It's away from us. Instead, it turns completely around, sees us, and starts charging to the road, to the car. And I looked at my wife and said, I don't know, what is that? That's not a coyote. My wife starts screaming, it's going to hit us. It's going to hit us. She curls up into a ball on the passenger side and just holding on. We're in a 2001 Kia Sportage. It's a small car, but it's high up off the ground. It's not a short car. As we get to the animal, I'm talking about, I had it on cruise control and I've still got my foot. I'm mashing now because my whole thought is I've got to get my family away from this thing. It's trying to attack us. Now, I have weapons in the car. I always have weapons on me. I had a 45, 9mm, and I have a 308 high-powered rifle in the back of the car because it's deer season now. I knew, as big as this animal was, nothing I had was, it was no reason to stay and fight. I wanted to get out of there. So, like I said, I push on the gas. As we kind of meet, we're about 10 feet apart as my driver's side window comes lined up with this creature, animal, whatever you want to call it. As it's running, it's not on all fours, but it kind of hunched over and looking like it is. I said, I'm 10 feet away from this thing. I got a good look at it. I looked directly into its eyes. It looked into mine. Its mouth was kind of open. It had like an animal fixing to grab prey, like a dog, cat, whatever. Right before it gets ready to grab, its mouth comes open. That's the way its mouth was. Its eyes were a yellowish amber color. Easiest way I can describe it. Now, they're not lighting up or nothing like that. Just the illumination from my headlights is what caught that. But like I said, they're yellow looking, amberish. There's no more light illuminating this animal because my headlights are now past it. It's beside me, about 10 feet. I'm looking straight at it. This thing had an overly large wolf-shaped head, but its ears, the way this ears, they look like big spades on top of its head. I'm talking about, and they're a lighter color on the inside. The animal was a dark gray black to a light gray on its side. You're probably talking, if I had to estimate, probably 400 plus pounds. This animal was. You could see every rippling. It looked like a pro wrestler on steroids. Like I said, it was. You could just see the muscle mass as it's running. The muzzle wasn't real long, but it was stuck out probably 5 or 6 inches. It looked like you could tell the muscular in its face, and the hair wasn't real shaggy. It was probably 4 or 5 inches long, but you could see it flowing. It wasn't, real long and droopy. And like I said, as we passed right there, I'm thinking, I'm getting ready. It's fixing to hit my door, is what I think. And like I said, just so happened I had been going faster than what I was supposed to be. And if I had to been, it would have centered my driver's side door. It passed right behind the vehicle. My tail lights, without no brake lights being matched, just the tail lights. As I'm looking in my side mirror, I can see it light the hair up on the animal as it goes past. I did not turn to see if the animal tried to follow us. My whole thing was, my wife was screaming. I'm trying to get as far away from this creature as I can, because if it would have hit us, it was big enough, it would have rolled us and probably took me out, and then my family would have been left to survive on their own. And I believe that's what it was trying to do. I believe it was trying to roll our vehicle because it was running, looked like as hard as it could. And like I said, I kept telling my wife, it's okay. She kept screaming. What was that? That was no coyote. That I've never seen nothing like it. She goes, it was as big as a cow. What was that? I said, there's no mistaking this animal for being anything other than what it is. It's an unknown cryptid wolf. Bipedal. I said, I don't know. That's why, like, when I contacted you, I told you I didn't know if I'd seen a werewolf, wolf, wendigo, whatever you want to call it. but I've never seen one before, and I hope I never see one again. That would be a blessing, because I don't. This animal was not. There was no reason for it to do what it done. It purposely turned to attack us, and there was no other cars on that road. We didn't meet another car probably for 40 miles. If it would have rolled us, like I said, it would have killed us. I have no doubt about that. That's my story.
Jay, you told me about the strange posture it had as it was running up on you. What kind of description can you give us on how it looked when it was running up on that car?
The easiest way I can describe that is it. You know how a football player kind of gets in this hunched over stance, running like to get ready to tackle? That's the way it looked. It was hunched over like it was getting ready, like a football player right before it gets ready to tackle. Its front was not touching the ground. It was hunched over, but like I said, its front paws, hands, whatever you want to call them, arms were not touching the ground. The only thing was touching the ground was his back feet. And he had legs like a dog. But like I said, I can't tell you if it had paws, feet, or what, because I wasn't paying attention to that. His eyes kind of had me tranced in right there, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I've seen some weird stuff.
I realized that Dogman was hunched over, so it might be hard to get an idea on how tall it might have been if it was standing up straight, but doing your best, giving your best guess, how tall do you think it would have been if it had stood up?
Well, just so happens, like I said, I went out and measured, because I figured you may ask me that. From the ground, I took a tape measure and put it on the ground. I sit in the vehicle and had my son hold it up to where my eyes and its eyes met. And that tape measure is at 5'6". I believe if this animal would have been standing up straight, it would have been 7+ feet. Because it was hunched way over. And like I said, because we were eye to eye, about 10 feet away, and there was no drop down on this road or nothing. It was smooth. Like I said, from standing outside, from a tape measure on the ground to where my eyes meet is almost as tall as I am. But like I said, I took a tape measure, and it's almost, this animal standing up, I believe, would have been 7 foot tall, if not taller. Because like I said, it was the way it was hunched over.
If it was that tall, hunched over, I wouldn't be surprised in the least if it was 7, 8 feet tall when it was standing up.
Broad. I'm talking about broad. It took up my whole window. I'm talking about the way it looked. I mean, it was 10 feet away from me. It was probably 3.5, 4 foot widthwise from shoulder to shoulder. It was massive. I'm talking about massive. And I said, I don't believe it would have had any problems turning that vehicle over. I believe if it would have hit it like it was trying to do, I believe it would have rolled us. That was what I believe it had intention. It was trying to roll us, stop us, and the only reason why I can think of that is to attack us. I don't know of any other reason why it would want to stop us.
Did you get a good look at its arms and its hands to be able to describe what they looked like?
Not its hands, but its arms. Yes, sir. The legs, well, I said that it was running on, looked just like a dog's legs, but it was standing upright. The arms, the arms looked like they might have been a little longer than what they should have been. From when it was hunched over, it's hard to tell. But like I said, I did not ever see, I don't remember seeing, and I've tried to remember if it had hands, paws, or what. I didn't focus on it. I focused on its face. And when I seen its eyes, it was just amazing. What in the world is this, and where did it come from?
When you're face to face with something like that, just being able to tell how many legs the thing has got is doing a good job. Now, from what I understand, from what you told me, your boys were in the car with you and your wife. What were they doing when all this was going on?
They had luckily fell asleep. Now, during all the commotion, the little one sleep. You could set a bomb off in the room with him. He's just a sound sleeper. He is not going to. The oldest one woke up and was asked, "What's going on? What's happening?" And his mom said, "Some kind of animal trying to hit our car." And he asked me, "What was it, Dad?" I said, "Son, I have no idea." I said, "It looked like a werewolf." My wife kept saying, my wife's a little more, I don't know exactly what you would call it. She's a little more into like the nature side. Uh, she kept telling me it had to have been a Wendigo or a skinwalker, because there's a lot of Native American. That's what the Natchez Trace is. It was an old Indian trail, and my grandfather was Native American. She's got some Native American background in her family, and she kept saying that had to have been a skinwalker or a Wendigo. But I don't know what exactly this animal was, but the descriptions from your radio show are the closest things that I have heard. And the picture I'm looking at right now from your site, that's, if it was hunched over running forward, it would be a very, very, if it was in a lineup, it would get picked.
The illustrator who created that logo for me, Chris Chin, he also created a side profile of that subject in the logo. I want to send that to you, and I'm also going to post that on the YouTube version of the show so the listeners can get a chance to take a look at that and see what I'm talking about. After you have a chance to see that illustration, I want you to let me know what you think. If that kind of matches what you're talking about here tonight, I'll bet it does.
If you'll email them to me, I'll sure look at them and I'll give you a answer, yes, no. But like I said, from what I'm looking at right now, while I'm talking to you, like I said, if it was in a police lineup, it would get picked as number one suspect. I'd never heard of these creatures before. I didn't know how until I got to researching it. These things, it seems like every year, like I was telling you before, every year it seems like the sightings and occurrences and encounters keep growing. I don't know if more people are just coming out or they're just showing up more. But like I said, I've been in the woods all over the place. I've never have run into anything like this. I've never seen signs in the woods, and I've tracked everything you can think of, from humans to dogs to you name it, and I've tracked it.
Jay, after you had that encounter, I'm sure like anyone else who sees one of these things, you dove headlong into a search for information. How did it go?
Because I didn't know exactly what to call it or what it was. So we started searching. Me and my wife, like I said, we helped. She was on the computer, I'm on an iPad, and we would put in like werewolves in Mississippi, Wendigo, skinwalkers, strange bipedal creatures in Mississippi. And like I said, it was a lot of reading and figuring out, well, no, this ain't what I saw, or this doesn't sound right, or this sounds kind of hokey. And like I said, and then I got into, like I said, I run across the name Dogman on one of the sites. I'm not exactly sure what site that was. I think it was off of Google. I know that. Oh, I put in Sasquatch in Mississippi sightings because I was just trying to find out anything in that area people had seen. And Dogman came up. And I'm thinking, okay, what is Dogman? So I click on it and I start searching that. And some of the descriptions were close. And like I said, I've seen Sasquatches several times. What they were describing was not a Sasquatch. I've never seen a Sasquatch with a muzzle, like a dog. Now, I come across some stuff that said that there's several different kinds of Sasquatches. I'm not saying there's not. I'm not no expert. And as a matter of fact, I don't think there is no experts on Sasquatch or none of this stuff because we don't have one to study. But I found the Dogman on there, and I put in a couple searches, and your show, Dogman Encounters, popped up. And I clicked on it, and it carried me to YouTube. And I started listening to one of your episodes. I think it was episode 5. And I'm like, that sounds real close to, what I saw. And so I just typed in Dogman Encounters, and I started binge listening to all your shows. And I'm like, that's got to be what it was. What the hell is Dogman? And like I said, that's the reason why I contacted you. When I contacted you, like I told you, I don't know if I seen a werewolf, Wendigo, what I saw. But this is what it looked like when you contacted me, I told you. And you told me that sounds right. But like I said, the other thing I left off on his ears, like I said, they were spade-shaped, but the way its ears looked were giant. If you took a bobcat's ears, how they had the tufts of hair comes off the ends, that's the way this thing, his ears, it ended with little tufts of hair coming off the end of its ears. But I'm talking, they looked like they were probably the size of my hand. And they went up as a spade shape. That's not a normal wolf's ears look in the wild. These things are almost right on top of its head, the way it looked. And as it gets closer to the vehicle, it kind of leans them down like, an animal does when it's zeroing in on its prey. That's what it done.
I'm sure since you're moving down the road so fast and you had the windows up, the answer to this question is most likely no, but did you ever hear it make any sound?
No, sir, I did not. I did not hear a sound, except for my beating heart. We did have the windows up because it was cooler that night. It started getting cooler, and we had the heat barely on. And like I said, we had the radio playing. Like I said, my wife was hollering, it's going to hit us, it's going to hit us. But no, sir, I never heard any sound from that animal.
From talking to you in the pre-interview, you mentioned that in the process of researching what you saw that night, you wound up talking with someone from the BFRO. Please tell us about that.
I'm not real happy with that organization. I don't mean to offend anybody, or that's not my way. But this group, they wanted to tell me that I saw a Bigfoot, and I tried to explain to them, no, it was not a Bigfoot. And every time I would start trying to tell them exactly like I did you, what it looked like. No, it couldn't look like that. It looked like this. No, ma'am, it did not, because it was a lady. No, and then she got me on the phone with this other guy that was there. And I just told him, I said, look, I thank y'all for y'all's time. I'm sorry I wasted y'all's time, but I won't contact y'all anymore, and don't contact me. And hung up the phone. Like I said, they wouldn't listen. They wanted to change my story to fit what they wanted it to. And their whole thing was, is that public land? Do you think we could go out and do it? Would you be interested in going back on an invest? Lady, I don't want to mess with this thing. No, I'm not, and I wouldn't advise you to go out and mess with it. Like I said, these people that go out and try to call in Bigfoot and stuff like that, you're not going to go out and try to call in a wild grizzly bear, are you? And try to film it up close, or no. They're wild animals. If you don't leave them alone, they're going to make you leave them alone. It's the only thing their only course is to attack you, to hurt you, to kill you, to make you leave them alone. And I don't believe these things like in Sasquatch. I've only ever seen one by itself, and it was a juvenile. I mean, it wasn't a juvenile. It was a full-grown male, and we had teed it off majorly. Any other time, juveniles, whatever, it's not the one that you see that you got to worry about. It's the other ones. Because if you make an aggressive move, I have no doubt that would be the last mistake you ever make. I believe maybe these dogmen may do the same thing. If they're anything like a wolf, if people want to think they're just a giant wolf, well, wolves don't travel alone. They're pack animals. You have an alpha and an omega, and then you have underlings. They don't hunt alone. They don't do nothing alone. They don't live alone. So if people want to think they're a giant wolf, okay, think they're a giant wolf. What do wolves do? They hunt in packs.
Through the course of this encounter, did you ever get the impression that it might not have been alone, that there might have been another one nearby?
No, sir, I didn't really think of that. My whole thing was thinking, I've got to get as much distance in between me and this creature because my family's with me. That was my whole thing. I've got to get my family out of here. And, things might have been different if I wouldn't have my family. I might not have been so panicky. I knew as soon as I figured out this was not what I thought it was, and it was coming at us, and as it gets to you, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's not nothing you've ever seen before. And like I said, just the mass of this animal and its eyes, I knew there was nothing I could have done. Nothing. I could have emptied everything I had at it. And I don't believe it would have helped. And like I said, my whole thing was my family. I've got to get them out of here. Like I said, I never looked back to even see if it was following us, if what it was doing. My whole thing was hopefully it will stay there, and I'm going as fast as this little thing will go. And I didn't slow down for a long time until my wife finally told me, can you please slow down before you wreck us? And I really don't want to be stranded out here. So I backed off. Still, I was doing faster than what I should have been doing. But like I said, my wife, her whole thing was she helped me try to figure out what it was for her peace of mind. She just wants to forget it ever happened. And she really doesn't, like I said, she really doesn't want to discuss it because it scared her. She'll tell you, it scared her. I just don't want to have nothing to do with it.
Oh, no one could blame her for being so upset after seeing something like that that's not supposed to exist.
Like I said, when I decided I wanted to contact you, it was to get the story out there to let people know these things are out there. Somebody needs to know. Because what if I'd have been broke down on the side of the road changing a tire and this thing would have come up? If for some reason that car would have stopped, it would not have been good. I know it wouldn't have. I've been in bad situations before, and I can tell you it would not have ended good for us. I don't believe there's nothing I could have done to protect my family.
If it did decide to attack you, there wouldn't have been anything you could have done to protect yourself or your family, unfortunately. Now, after having this encounter, how's that affected your ability to go out into the woods and do whatever you normally would have done before you had this encounter?
It's made me look around more, but it hasn't stopped me. Like this weekend, I acquired land up here where like I said, I just bought a house and moved to the northern part of Mississippi. I don't know if you want me to disclose where that is, but like I said, I acquired 260 acres up here, and part of that acquired, and I have control of it. We had problems with illegal hunters, hunting clubs and stuff, and they would go out and set in snares and stuff like that. I went out this weekend, scouted out, removed snares, but it's made me think more about looking around, because I don't know what signs to look for in the woods to know if these animals are even in the woods with me. That's the biggest thing. I know what to look for most times, and that's what I look for, for the danger. I know what to look for when a man sets a snare. And once you know, it's kind of like putting a big flashing beacon out there. This land that I'm talking about, no one legally has been on this 260 acres in 15 years since it was cut. You're talking about pine trees growing wild for 15 years. The undergrowth is so thick you have to take a machete or a Kaiser blade to cut your way in just to make a trail. Or unless you can find a deer trail that you have to belly crawl through to get through. It's not going to deter me. Like I said, I'm more interested in finding out what these animals are, what to look for to avoid these animals, because this is a predator, no doubt about it. And I don't think I can hurt this predator. I really don't want to hurt this predator. I was always brought up, if you're not going to eat it, there's no reason to kill it. If I knew there was one on this land, I would avoid that area like the Black Plague. Because, like I said, as long as you're not making yourself trying to come into its area and take its food source or be a threat to it in kind of way, most predators will leave you alone. Now this, I don't know if it will or not. It would probably just soon attack you as look at you. But I said, it's not changed me. Now, I haven't took my kids out since that, but we had tornadoes and stuff tonight. We're going in the woods deer hunting tomorrow morning.
When you told your kids about what you had seen that night when they were sleeping in that back seat, what was their reaction? How did they respond to that?
My oldest one, unfortunately, takes after his father, and he doesn't have sense to be scared when he should. He wanted to turn around and go back to see exactly if it was still there or see if we could find prints. His mama was very adamant and no. She used a few other words than that, but it was no. The little one, he's kind of worried and scared because he asked me, matter of fact, earlier, he said if we want to cross one of those big wolves is what he calls it. What are we going to do? I said, if it doesn't see us, we're not going to act like we see it. We're going to leave it alone. But I don't think, I haven't seen any signs out where we are, so I think we'll be all right.
Oh, I'm sure you will be. Knowing what you know now, having seen what you saw that night, what do you think about these people who go out into the woods looking for these things?
I think they're asking for trouble. They're not a pet. That's like the Bigfoot thing. Yes, I've seen them on several different occasions have actually tracked a juvenile, thinking when I first got into tracking, I thought I was tracking actually a human, a poacher, but it wasn't. It was a juvenile Sasquatch. These people that go out and look for these animals, they're going to keep looking and they're going to find something they don't want to find. This animal, like I said, is not a pet. Going out calling to it, thinking, oh, it's going to come up to you, and I don't know what they're wanting, but you don't go out and call a grizzly bear in and try to have a conversation with it. These things I believe, are worse than a grizzly.
Well, that makes two of us. You talked about your wife and how she reacted when you saw that dogman that night. Let's get into how she dealt with that encounter a little bit here. Did she do anything special to try and help herself get over the trauma of that encounter, or did she just basically rely upon you to dig up any information on the topic that you could find?
No, sir. She got in trying to figure it out because, like I said, when something like it happens to me, it scares me. I don't scare easily. My whole thing is I want to find out what it is. My fight or flight, like I said, I had my kids and my wife with me. That's the reason why, like I said, I didn't want to stick around to find out or even attempt to try to fight this thing. I was thinking of them. But normally, that's not my instinct. My instinct is to stay there and stand my ground. That's just what I've always been taught in my training. Running usually from a wild animal is the worst thing you can do because it just brings in their instinct to hunt. This, though, was a different story. I believe if I would have stood my ground, I believe if I would have had whatever weapon, I could have dumped everything I had into it, and it wouldn't have helped me. I would probably just made it even madder.
Yeah, you're probably right. Having received as many stories as I have from people who have tried shooting at one of these things, some with some pretty formidable weaponry, and not having the desired effect, I kind of cringe when I hear people talk about heading out into the woods with a 45 on their hip, as if that's going to protect them from one of these things. It just doesn't make sense.
No, sir. A 45 was designed for one thing. It was designed to stop a human. It wasn't designed for an animal. That's what the 45 was designed for. When they designed that gun, they were having the Filipino Wars, and what our servicemen were carrying for 38 specials and stuff, they'd hit them and they'd keep coming at them and attack them. They brought out the 45s. You could hit somebody in the shoulder with it, and they're going down. They don't want to fight no more. My dad is no such thing as an ex-Marine, excuse me for that, to all the Marines. He did 4 tours in Vietnam with a Ford Recon Scout Sniper. I said, I learned a lot of my stuff from him and from my grandfather that fought in the Korean Wars. And I said, people that go out and looking for these things, they're looking for trouble. And if they keep on, you're probably not going to ever hear from them when they go out one time.
Having seen what you saw that night, seeing what that dogman looks like and must be capable of, can you imagine one of these people who's so ill-prepared for an encounter being out there face-to-face in the middle of the woods with one of these things, with nowhere to go, no way to protect themselves?
And this may sound harsh to some people. My suggestion to somebody that finds yourself out there with a weapon, this thing comes at you and you have nowhere to go, your best bet is to use your weapon on yourself. that would be my suggestion, because like I said, I'm very familiar with weapons. I'm very familiar with what weapons do. I don't know of anything but a 50 caliber Barrett that I'd feel comfortable shooting this thing with, and I don't know very many people that have those.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
The only thing I can think of, Vic, is these animals are out there. I don't know what they are. I would love to know what they are just to satisfy my curiosity. But I believe they need to be left alone if you can leave them alone. There's no reason to go out and anger these animals, because if you anger them, and I don't know what, well, I said this thing was already teed off or something. I don't know what its thing was, but just think if it came into an urban environment. You can make an animal mad enough that they will get aggressive enough to track you and follow you. And animals can track you for a long way, especially predatory animals. So I believe they need to be left alone. If you have an encounter, come here. Tell Vic about it to let other people know, hey, maybe when you're in this area, you may need to pay a little more attention and of what's going on around you. And like I said, if you see something, back out. Leave it alone. That would be my suggestion.
Those are really good words of advice. I wish more people would listen to them. Well, Jay, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing the details of that encounter with us. I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate everything you're doing. And like I said, I just wanted to get the story out there. Like I said, and if more people would not worry about what everybody else thinks because they've seen something, until there would probably be more stories and people would less likely to be hurt probably by one of these things, or more, and we find out more information. Like I said, my biggest thing is there's not enough information out there to even tell you if the one is in your area. I guess if I see giant wolf prints or on the ground, well, if I see giant footprints on the ground, I'm leaving that area anyway. But I said, I have not found any information except for what you told me, if one's in the area to even look for. I don't know if they make nests. I don't know how they bed down. I don't know what they do. That was my whole thing is to me, knowledge is power. And knowing what this animal, how it moves, what it does, what its habits are, is to me better than trying to go out and hunt this thing down. I don't think that's ever going to wind up good.
Oh, I think you're right. I think going out and trying to hunt one of these things down would probably be the last mistake you make.
Yes, sir. And like I said, just because it's different, I don't think it should be killed either. I'm talking about, like I said, I'm firm believer, if you're not going to eat, if you don't need it to eat to survive, there's no reason to harm that animal or hurt that animal. And I'm a big time hunter. I love to hunt. My boys love to hunt.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, there's no reason to go out there and try to kill one of these things for what? Well, thanks again so much for coming on, Jay. I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing your time like that.
Yes, sir, and thank you.
Have a great night.
Yes, sir, you too. Good night.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com.